Hello and welcome to Your Business, Your Wealth. My name is Paul Adams. I am the CEO and founder of Sound Financial Group. And today I am joined by Corey out on the road with maybe the most picturesque setting he's had behind him for one of our episodes.
Maybe.
Corey, where are you?
I am here in Northern California, just a day's drive from the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. Uh, don't know why that's important, but I thought someone would get a kick out of knowing that. Uh, yeah, so it might be the most beautiful. I have had some other beautiful settings behind me in my travels. I feel like a reporter on location
Yeah.
right now, but thankfully there's no hurricane behind me. It's just the nice, fog of Northern California burning off, which is why I've got the tea in my hand, bundled up just a little bit, but excited to be here from the road.
Yep. Well, today I think is going to be kind of a fun little conversation because we're going to take some relationship advice from Chris Rock and apply that to your finances. Now, the reason that this financial advice from Chris Rock I think is so useful is it kind of takes a funny approach to looking at it. There's a little bit of coarse language we're bleeping out. But what I think everybody can get is the reason
We are a
why.
firmly PG-13 show.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we just crossed over. Um, but what we want everybody out there to be able to think about is it is one, if you're a single person, you're able to make all your own financial decisions, all your future plans. Probably even more important that somebody who's single gets a chance, divorce, single, etc., gets a chance to have work with a coach and advisor because it opens up the opportunity to have a second set of eyes look at what you're doing, because the more money you make and the more assets you
Right.
accumulate, the more high consequence any mistakes are. And so when you have a spouse, you sort of have another person sort of looking at your paper, if you will, but that person may or may not have the background expertise. And then the other problem is you both bring whatever financial baggage you have to financial conversations just based upon how your life's gone up to that point.
Right.
And so I think what we should do is pause here for a second, Corey. Let's share the clip with everybody, and then we'll go from there.
Perfect.
All right, so here we are with Chris Rock's. It's a short little YouTube short. We can go ahead and put the link to this in the description so you guys can find it if you want to watch it yourselves or share it with somebody. But let's just watch it together here real quick.
Oh, relationships are tough. No, they're not. They're only tough when one person's working on it. Two people can move a couch real easy. One person can't move it at all. If you're in a relationship, let me try to help you right now. Rule one: stop competing. Her success is your success, and your success is her success. Number two, there is no equality in a relationship. It's like, we equals. No, you're not. You're both there to serve. You are in the service industry, okay? You're in a band. And when you're in a band, you have roles that you play in the band. Sometimes you sing lead, and sometimes you're on tambourine. And if you're on tambourine, play it right. Play it with a fucking smile. Because nobody wants to see a mad tambourine player. People say,
So, so what I love about that is it's like the two big things are, one, you're both in the service industry. You're both serving one another. You're certainly serving your future aims that you're working on. And everybody plays roles and they're not necessarily
Yeah.
equal. Like in my house, my wife runs all the monthly bills and I run all the long-term investing and planning. But we talk about both together.
Right. I love, the very beginning with that couch metaphor. He's saying like it's not about how strong you are, how good you are. Like all the couches we have, if it was something I was benching, like I could probably bench the weight of any of our couches, but they're long and awkward. Doesn't matter how strong I am. I mean, I could try. I could probably get the couch out the door, but I would do significant damage to the couch or the house in the process of doing that. I think that's what he's what he's getting at there. Like it can be hard if you just try to do it all by yourself, but I love that both being there to serve. Like if
Well,
everybody, it's not 50-50. If everyone's 100-100, that's when a relationship works really well.
yeah. Yeah. And think about that as it relates to planning. So with planning, can one spouse do all the planning? Potentially,
Yeah.
but
I
how
mean,
much
you can get
damage is
there.
getting done going out the
Right.
door?
Right.
Because now let's think about what kind of damage that is. That means one person is going to have to tell the other person, if they're the only one doing long-term planning, at some point you might have to turn to your spouse and say, we just can't spend money on that anymore. Well, why? It's like, well, now to answer that question would mean I got to bring you up to speed on the last 4 or 5 years of financial planning we've been doing. This is not a quick, because it's raining outside kind of answer. It's because there's something big we've been working on in the background. And this level of spending conflicts with
Right.
that, or we can't get the new car right now, or whatever it is. And how it will show up to the spouse that's not involved in planning are like a bunch of can'ts, won'ts,
Right.
or shoulds, which don't feel good to anybody.
Mm-mm. Ultimatums, like you want to run into problems real fast in a relationship of any kind. Ultimatums are a great way to get
Yeah.
into.
Well, and so what can we do? So if you're listening to this right now and your spouse hasn't been with you in the planning, we've got a couple of ideas we could share with you of conversations you could have with your spouse to bring them into the conversation.
Yeah.
Now, we'll talk about ways to entice them as well, but just metaphors and examples that you can use. And I'll give one that's the one that sits most with me, where I think you could think about somebody saying, well, once we're retired, then I'll pay attention. Or once I get over 50, I'll start paying attention to that, says one spouse to the other spouse. But that would be a little bit like if I looked at my wife and said, hey, you raise those kids. Now, our kids are an inevitable part of our future as a couple. Inevitable. But if I said, you just get the kids going until they're teenagers because I do great with teenagers and then I'll start working with them. Well, one, I won't know enough about them. I won't have enough relationship. It's not going to go well between me and the children at that point because I won't have had all this history. And I actually know a story of a grandfather that said that about his grandkids. I'm not really interested in them while they're young. I just want to work with them when I'm a teenager or when they're teenagers.
Wow.
And
They didn't want to hang out with grandpa, I'd imagine.
that's exactly right. There was no relationship for them to build on once they were teenagers. And fortunately, the friend of mine, who this was his father-in-law, could see far enough down the road to let him know that's probably not going to work, but it's no different with money. If you have one spouse that's been working on your planning for the last 15 years, then they know all this background and the whys behind everything, but you don't have any relationship to it. So it makes it very difficult to onboard even later. The other thing that it does to you, so you're probably the spouse that handles the money if you're listening to this,
Right.
but should you share this episode with your spouse that doesn't participate at all in your planning conversations, this is something that just from me, okay, this is not coming from your spouse, but from me of 25 years of working with clients. And that is that there is no way your spouse can win if you're not involved.
Yep.
Because you get to retirement and you guys are able to retire and you're financially secure, that's what you expected them to do. So what do they want, a cookie for getting all that handled? And second could be if it falls apart and doesn't work in some way. And you can kind of imagine what those arguments look like. Like, how come we don't have enough money? I thought you were in charge of this retirement. Well, I couldn't because you kept buying cars and vacations. And then the two end up going back and forth with one another. And you wonder why it is that A, finances are the biggest reason for divorce. And B, we end up with a lot of people divorcing after the age of 60. I think they call them gray divorces. And some of the, like, you could see why that might happen because how do you live the rest of your life with a person that you thought? Now, I think it was a bad assumption to think your spouse would just handle the retirement planning, but how do you live the rest of your life together with the person that screwed up that one job that they had? And that can lead to those divorces later in life, which is a huge destructor of wealth on top of maybe not having planned as well as you'd liked to begin with. So that's,
I think the spouse that doesn't participate, they tend to get the like glazy eyed really fast at a lot of numbers all in one spot, which is a certain personality type. And it's just the one that likes looking at the numbers can be. Now, it can also be just the one that doesn't like it the least. Like they don't necessarily like it, but they get pushed into it. So I think one of the things I've found in getting the other spouse involved is to not start with the numbers of it, but the where do you want to go together, like the dreaming about life and what's important, so that anything you do or don't do inside of the numbers later is not about depriving yourselves, but about moving towards the thing that you want. Like we really want to be able to go on these vacations with the kids when they're a little bit older. So we're going to not spend as much money in these other places right now to put it towards that. So that it's putting it towards something, not just, oh, yeah, you're spending too much on cars. Right? That should never be the reason.
Which you're right, is that the trouble is if you guys are not on the same page with what these future plans are attempting to achieve, then all it can be is the list of cans, shoulds, don'ts from the one who is handling the long-term planning. And the other part is if you're not participating in it, then the aims that you have that you want to have achieved will only get achieved with your money by like coincidence or by accident rather than by design. Because if your spouse doesn't have your input and your financial coach doesn't have your input for what you want the future to look like, then you won't get there. And almost no one fully understands this stuff when they start engaging in it. Like I remember one great example for everybody here is a friend of mine who is a CPA was a client of mine for like 3 years. And suddenly in the middle of our client meeting, he says, you know what, Paul, I've heard you talk. It was one particular concept I taught called velocity of money. And it's the idea of how we use money multiple times on somebody's balance sheet. He's like, it's been 3 years that I've been a client, implemented everything that we worked on. And for the first time after 3 years, I really understand what that means. I only sort of understood it the last 3 years. So it's not something you can feel like. I think sometimes people show up to a financial meeting and feel like they should know all the distinctions or feel like they shouldn't ask questions. Like A, ask the questions. B, make sure you get your aims, your goals for the future heard by both your spouse and by your advisor. Because if let's say your aims are way off, that you're like, hey, I think we should have an $8 million home in retirement, travel the world on vacation on a cruise line, have 2 Teslas in the driveway plus a collectible Lamborghini in the garage. And then, then you start looking at the numbers. You're like, well, we make $300,000 a year and we probably can't achieve all of that.
Perfect.
But you will inevitably be disappointed otherwise because you just didn't have the right assumptions to build that future upon. But we can achieve some amazing things. And one of the most amazing things we can achieve together with your spouse, or that you and your spouse can achieve together with an advisor, is the ability to put together well-grounded assessments of what the future can look like so that you get those wins and start moving toward that future that you're colonizing instead of ending up in by accident. Like you wouldn't have a vacation that your spouse planned where you had zero input. And yet the 20 to 30 years of quote unquote vacation of financial independence and being able to have a work optional lifestyle is getting planned right now. And if you're not a part of it, you really should consider digging in and helping your spouse lift that couch. Because right now they're trying to wrestle it out the door by themselves. And no matter how you slice it, I have never had let's say the one spouse that's the primary decision maker. I would say it's more than half the time the man, but not always the man. And you're having them try to wrestle this couch out the door, and there's none of them we've ever spoke to that doesn't want the non-financial spouse in those meetings. The
Right.
reason they will tell the advisor is because they're saying, and I'm talking to the kind of, what'd you call it? The one who hates it the least. Sometimes it's not that they like
Right.
it,
Right.
but the one that hates it the least, it puts them in a position where they can't take good care of you because they're trying to take care of how you feel right now that you don't want to be in the meetings. And we
Right.
love for both spouses to be in the meeting and we advocate for it. And I want you to know that your financial spouse is advocating for your current comfort and they don't want to upset you or piss you off because they got to be with you the rest of the week and don't want to have you drug into a meeting
Right.
and all of that. Like, for your financial spouse, if you said, hey, I'd really start to like learning those meetings, can I start attending them? Even if you don't work with our firm, you work with somebody else, I think 90% of the time you're going to see the spouse that's been handling all these things kind of light up because you might not know how to move the couch, but if you're willing to learn, you can make a big difference in helping get that mission achieved because
Right.
taking two is a lot easier than one person wrestling with it for the next 20 or 30 years. And then they're probably the one wrestling with it for decades into retirement too without your help.
Well, and you mentioned gray divorces. If you think about it, if you're not moving together somewhere, if you're not moving somewhere together with your spouse right now, you may be slowly drifting apart, and so slowly you don't realize it until all of a sudden you realize you're past arm's length to hang on to each other. I think that's where people get 20, 30 years into a marriage where it's kind of like boiling a frog, but it's just that 1 degree shift every day. So money's not every part of the relationship, although money tends to touch more other parts of a relationship than any other parts of a relationship tend to touch others, right? It kind of weaves into all these places because it's the fuel for how we do a lot of things. So it's not the only thing that needs to get solved, but solving the money may help bring you close enough together to solve the other pieces if you're having some other issues.
Yeah, I think that's really well put, Corey. Well, with that, we hope this episode has given you at least a humorous look and maybe kind of a fun episode you can share with your spouse if you're the one primarily listening to these. And we just hope that this, like our other episodes, has been a contribution to you being able to design and build a good life.